Hello and welcome to the Charles River Conservancy Parkland Show. My name is Renata von Tscharner. I'm the founder of the Charles River Conservancy and I'm now on the advisory board and I'm here with Catherine Donaher. And this show was Catherine's idea. Catherine's a founding board member, so we're going to turn the table today and Catherine is going to do the show.
Thanks, Renata. I'm delighted to do it, and it's a privilege because my affiliation with Renata on the Charles River started almost 20 years ago. And so we're going to talk through this half hour about what has gone on during those years and what Renata has accomplished. So I would like to start right off by asking you, what did you have in mind when you started this 18 years ago, when you started the Charles River Conservancy? Where did you want to be 18 years later as we sit here?
Well, I was teaching at the Radcliffe seminars and I picked the Charles as the topic for students to do projects along the river. I lived near the river. I loved the river and I loved teaching, but I realized teaching is not going to change things at the rate I wanted things to change. So I decided I wanted to start an organization and I wanted to focus on the urban river. And so that is the area that is there circled in red from the harbor up to the Watertown Dam. And so that's the area I wanted to focus on because I'm a urban planner, I'm an architect. I really wanted to change that urban part of the river.
So what did you want to change it from to? What was it about it that wasn't okay?
Well, first of all, I wanted to swim in the river. I'm Swiss, I always used to swim in the river. I also saw areas that were kind of dead. They were just transportation infected, under highways, toxic. So there were a lot of opportunities along the river. And just the general maintenance also, something bothered me. I guess I'm a bit Swiss. I like things a bit more neat and better organized and easier to use. So these were kind of the issues I had.
So there were a lot of them were aesthetic and operational maintenance.
Yeah.
Quite a few. Had you ever run an organization before?
Yes, I had run a non-profit before, so I had a little bit of experience with a non-profit also in urban design. So it felt like something I could take on.
It was familiar, and you could. But you must have made a choice because we see, people who want to be change agents, they can just be out there by themselves on the hustings, which is a very different model from putting an organization together. What were the advantages of having an organization over just being a determined individual?
Well, I wanted to do both. Well, as an organization, you can get tax-deductible donations from people. As an organization, you're not alone doing it. So
Right.
you're building up a core of people who fight with you, who work with you. So obviously having volunteers and others people involved. I just felt this was more effective than me doing it alone.
And how did you build support? You put a label on the door and you say, here I am, we're an organization now. What was next? How did you build support?
I remember it was July 4th, I think it was 2000, and I wrote a letter to 100 people and I described the idea and then had a symposium and I described what I wanted to do. And I realized it was important to have one element is, what is this river? Because it's both Cambridge and Boston, kind of it falls in between the cracks. So I felt it was important to really capture that amazing ribbon of blue, ribbon of green. So people start thinking of it, of not just being the space between Cambridge and Boston, and it's hard to find the bridges, so that this becomes a space in itself that is worth talking about and doing something about.
So what did you then spend your first year doing? How did you get out there and rev it up?
Well, one thing is I learned that Carl Haglund, who worked for the MDC at the time, the Metropolitan District Commission, now the DCR, had just finished his PhD thesis about the Charles River.
Yeah.
And so I figured, well, this is such important information. I will never know as much as Carl Haglund, so let's get this information out. I went to see him and he said, oh, I just finished. I can't spend any more time. So I said, okay, we can help you with that. And so within a relatively short time, with the help of wonderful people, we co-published that book with MIT Press. I wrote the captions, we added chapter of images, but it's Carl's text. It's a serious academic text about the basin, the history, all the planning battles. An amazing book. So I felt it was crucial that we have that as a base, and then we can build on that.
So we had a kind of universal understanding of what the river was, where it came from, why it is the way it is today.
Yeah.
And then we could go forward. But you mentioned something a minute ago that I think is worth pausing for, and that was, you talked about the fact that the river is the space in between Boston and Cambridge. And I'd like you to opine as to whether you think that's an advantage or a disadvantage.
Well, let me show you an image of Lynch, what was his name?
Kevin Lynch.
Kevin Lynch described the area of around the bridge there, saying nobody knows where the river flows into the Charles because it's no man's land.
It's hidden under the
It's
hidden under all that infrastructure, the railroads, the bridges.
So the fact that people don't even know where certain areas are on the Charles and don't even know who owns them, and actually part of that land in North Point Park is Boston, so that's utterly confusing. So to create an identity for a space is very important, just to inform people more about what is where and what could be done.
Well, I'm thinking about the identity, but I'm also thinking about ownership. You know, to care about something, you have to have a bit of ownership in it. So would you say that Boston and Cambridge together, separately, individually, really own the river, or have they kind of moved back and let the other people move in?
Well, technically, they don't own the river. It's owned by the state. I mean, that was this plan, this municipal idea of Charles Eliot.
I'm talking about ownership in the sense of caring about something.
Yeah.
Do you own something that you're excited about?
Well, psychologically, they might own it, but the fact that neither Boston, nor Cambridge, nor Newton, nor Watertown have any control over it.
No jurisdiction.
Is a major part.
Yeah.
And that's something that we worked on to get Cambridge and Boston more involved, because we need their support to make the state-owned land, because the state is a big area.
Right.
And they can't care about it as much.
Well, you referred, you have the slide up here. Let's move it over. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you got it there.
Okay.
Okay. This area here, you have, the slide is labeled the site of the skate park. The skate park was a really big project for the CRC. It pretty much dominated our agenda for many, many years. So what was it about a skate park that you thought was going to be the way that we should launch ourselves, the way we should kind of get in the swim, so to speak?
Yeah, that's another one.
But that we'll talk about later. But I mean, it's an unconventional use. It's very limited in who's going to use it. It was going to take a lot of money. It needed, I mean, here we are barely walking, toddling around, and we take on this big project.
Yeah.
So tell us what drove you to make that decision as opposed to all the others you could have made.
Well, first of all, I did not know how long it would take, because
No, of course not.
Other skate parks, although they have taken quite just as much time, but pretty much all other skate parks were either completely privately funded, commercial is a waiver form, or they were municipal skate parks, like in Louisville, which was one example.
Yeah.
So they came from a different place, but obviously here we are non-profit, we have state land, and I have a son who is a skateboarder, and there was this space underneath the Zaken Bridge, which was no man's land. It would have been a parking lot. It was just crying for something to be done.
Yeah.
So we took that project on, and we labored and labored, and then we did open it, and it was a wonderful thing, and we proved we could do it. But it was definitely a lot of work, and it didn't happen overnight.
No, I mean, I don't think any of us expect nowadays that these big, that these capital projects happen instantly when you have so many vested interests and so forth. But it seems to me, as I look back on it, the skate park really did launch the CRC. It was the one thing that we were clearly identified with uniquely. Nobody else was doing anything like it. And so do you really feel that this was probably a really good move that you made, whether you knew it or not at the time?
I think it in retrospect, definitely it is.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's such a big stretch with $1 million of legal fees, and I think the administration and the commissioner changed, I think, 8 or 9 times, each time a new staff. So there were a lot of other things we did in the meantime, and I think these other things are very important, because had we just pursued this one capital project, which we never knew whether it's really going to happen, although I was determined and I was stubborn. So we did a lot of other things.
And I want to get to those.
Oh,
Those
right.
are my,
Okay.
how did you know? That's
Okay.
a great segue into our next set of discussions here. Let me list a few of the other projects, areas, interests that the CRC was following at this point. You set up a system of volunteers. You brought volunteers there. I want to run through them, and then you can speak to them
Okay.
collectively. You brought the Revels, this wonderful music, singing, and dancing event that's well known to the Boston and Cambridge area. You brought that to the river and brought thousands there singing and dancing. Not a particularly conventional thing to do. You published stories. You brought people together to tell their own personal stories about how they interacted with, cared about, felt about the river. Beautifully illustrated. You brought children and parents and groups of people, young people, old people, on Sunday afternoon to play games, almost like a throwback to days when we were growing up. And you lit the bridges. The river had been dark at night, and all of a sudden we illuminated these bridges and the river came to life in the nighttime. Tell me about how these kinds of things fit in with building a skate park and everything else, and how did you make anything coherent out of it?
Well, the skate park, building a skate park in concrete and legal permits and toxic soil are big challenges. So I felt we also need things that make it easier for people to fall in love with. I mean, I think now that the skate park is built, a lot of skaters have fallen in love with it. But all along it was clear to me that people needed to relate to the river in an emotional way, that they could tell their story, or they saw their beauty, they would plant bulbs,
Right.
or to see with the bridges. So I always felt adding these emotional components were very important, because it's the same with raising funds. If you love something, you're more likely to give to it. If you relate to it, you can give money to it, and that's the personal connection.
Did it work? Did people fall in love with the river? What's your experience been with this approach?
Oh, if you look at the river stories, it's one big love story.
Yeah.
People telling us, oh, I love that river. I mean, David Gergen saying his parents courted on the Charles, he himself courted on the Charles, his children courted on the Charles. All the courting stories I heard.
Yeah.
That.
So it's a romantic place.
It's a romantic place, not
Yeah.
just in love story,
Right.
but in many people's lives.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, with all that love and affection and whatever, you still had to show your strength. You had to show you could get things done, unconventional things, conventional things, new things, creating fun. So you had to do something to keep the CRC afloat. Had to raise money, you had to create the support, financial support, you had to get governmental support. You've spoken to that in regard to the skate park and funding it. You created an organization to fill in the blanks and the gaps that government used to fill. When we look back on the creation of the Esplanade and the creation of so many of the elements of the Charles River historically, that was done by government. So what's the mix that needs to happen here now? We have less government, we have more nonprofits, we have more private money coming in. How do you see the funding of these parklands continuing? And how are we going to, do we have the right balance now?
Yeah, well, one example is the bridges. When the state was about to renovate that bridge, we realized this is the moment to fight for underpasses. And this is not something that a private organization should fund, but we as advocates, so we funded the advocacy for that.
Yep.
And that is a very important role for a non-profit. We formed a coalition, we had over 50 groups, over 50 elected officials, we got a lot of press. So fighting for an idea, it still needs to be implemented, but we will keep fighting. Or another example is the I-90, where we partnered again with other people and then got designers involved from Sasaki to create a vision. It's very hard for a park agency that is understaffed and underfunded to fight against a sister agency, Mass DOT, that wants to build a highway, and to stand up and say, we need parks. So we became the spokesperson for the parks and for the bicyclists, for the connections. So that is a very important role that we keep playing. And it's not, we do get some funding for people who love our advocacy, but this is a hard one to fund. We are not able to implement those plans. That would be the millions of dollars. So we need to be the icing on the cake, with the highway being the cake.
Well, I understand that, but these are projects. That's what the federal government, the state government will fund. But what about keeping your doors open day to day? How do you keep an organization going on your own to keep the lights on, as they like to say?
Well, we built a database of, we have now about over 40,000 people on a database, and they receive a monthly newsletter. They receive mailings 3 times a year. They do send us money. Some people love us.
So how much of your budget comes from private fundraising? That's what I'm asking you, really.
About a third is private, a third is corporate, and a third is from foundations. Very little public money.
Okay. So in effect, what one has to do is cobble together all the different resources that are available, and you have to have an apparatus within your organization to pull those together so that you can appeal to people who want to support your work.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Very good. Okay, so you started to talk a minute ago about I-90, and I wanted to go back a little bit in time in order to go forward. When the Esplanade was created, it was an amazing new park along the river. And then along came the cars and came Starro Drive and pushed that parkland to a half of what it was before.
I think the spot was a place where people swam also.
And people swam there, for sure. Let's never forget swimming. And so since then, it seems to me, both from North Point Park and now with I-90, that what we're trying to do is claw back, and I use that word advisedly, claw back the land that was originally set aside for people along the river, for the parklands. And so, as you indicated before, the transportation agencies get the big bucks, and the advocates like you and others, like us and others, are out there arguing for making sure that in that construction project there is a piece allocated for the river. Tell us about how well do you think you can get back some of those parklands? Who do you think, who will your allies be? And,
Oh, yeah.
and how much of that should be kind of the ongoing mission of the organization?
Yeah, yeah. So for instance, the I-90, which had a draft environmental impact report. So we really worked hard with other advocates, Walk Boston, one example, and 500 people wrote letters, you know, garden club members, our members. I mean, the number of letters written is huge. And they all said, we want parklands, we want connections, we want good bicycle connections. So it was a huge outcry. And there comes a moment when even a powerful agency like Mass DOT says, wow, what are all these letters? We need to respond to that.
Yeah.
So we tried different ways. We had many articles written by Renee Lost, by various people who loved the idea of working with more parklands. So we used all tools that we could find.
And basically you're saying advocacy and organizing are just essential. So they're as much a part of CRC as a defining element of your mission as building a skate park.
Absolutely.
Or, let's go to the next favorite topic, a swim park.
Absolutely, it's integrated part.
Right. So now we are at swimming.
All right.
And we know that for a long time, the Charles, like urban rivers everywhere, they just were seen as sewers. And we had a long period of time after the 50s when swimming wasn't allowed. We had a huge problem here in Boston with a perception reinforced by
A song.
played at Fenway Park at every game, or at least on the way out,
Yeah.
that talked about the dirty water in the Charles. So we had to deal with water quality as a major obstacle. Spend a little bit, we don't have a lot of time left, so spend just a short bit of time letting people know about what the water quality issue was and where we are with it.
So again, there is, you know, the science and the law, which says the water isn't quite clean enough and it's illegal to swim. And we had a water quality commission. And the commission said, well, prove to us that people want to swim. So we said, okay, let's organize a swim so people fall in love. It's again, getting into the water, loving it. And all these people, the 1,200 of them now, said, we want to swim not just once a year,
Right.
even if it's illegal on those other days, we want to swim every day. So
Right.
that kind of then triggered a capital project, triggered an effort to come up with a permanent solution. So you need to combine that.
And we also showed, and are showing, that the water is clean.
Yeah,
That we have the best river water in the country. And so that's no small feat.
yeah, and we work with Northeastern, and somebody from Northeastern tests the water every day in
Right.
the place we want to swim.
Right.
So, and we did a feasibility study of that it can be done.
That's right. And so let's take a look now at this image here, which is the proposed swim park on the Charles that we're moving quickly toward, as compared to the skate park, let's say. We're moving quickly toward getting that facility in the river for a soon-to-be summer. Not this one, but maybe next.
Yeah.
And so let's just finish on that note to talk about swimming and where we'll go beyond swimming.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to continue this, what I would call branding the river, making people know the river, love the river, and then they care for the river. So definitely going to continue with volunteer events. And I know Laura, the new executive director, and here we have a picture of her at the recent gala. Wonderful Laura Jasinski, who's the new executive director. She has a lot of experience with using temporary art for people to experience spaces in new ways. And people need to continue, more people need to fall in love with the river, because that's the driving force. It's almost like the gasoline that drives that engine of the love, the activities, the fun that people have. You mentioned river sing, with revels. wow, thousands of people gathering at the banks of the Charles, and people say, oh, I didn't know you could go there for a picnic and have music. So
Right.
these are very important parts.
So when you think about that, I mean, for me, the importance of swimming is that, you know, parklands, we have a lot of parklands. Never enough, but we have a lot of parklands all over. The unique thing is that these happen to be riverfront. So how do you combine the parkland and the water? That, to my mind, is where
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
really accomplished the unique quality of an advocacy group for a river
Yeah,
parkland.
yeah. And to come back onto the map, which I think is an important tool, is because the river is 10 miles long, so 20 miles total. So moving along the river is crucial. But I know we're going to be cut off
We are, in a
any
minute.
moment. So I want to make sure that people know how to contact us. And I really appreciate, Catherine, that you created that show for us together.
Well, so do I. It was
I
a
know.
delight.
And
And I hope we'll be able to do another one not too long from now.